Hi, this is Gayle with BERNINA of NAperville, and we're ready for a monthly installment for June for Serger Club. And you saw me make this dress kind of in a video where I scanned the flounce pattern on my 990 and made it into this dress, right? Well, now I need to accessorize, so I thought there's no better way to do this than to make our own trim and then braid it into a little headband. Now, you might want to use this technique in a very different way, and that's okay. But, we got to mix things up. It's not all about making clothes, it's not all about making quilts, sewing, serging. It's all about having fun and being as creative as possible. So, let's see how easy it is to take the stacked stitches technique and turn it into this or your own little piece of jewelry.
Serger Club is something that we do every month, and this month's topic is stacked stitches. The Serger Club is also special because we do a live and in-person presentation of this the first Friday of the month at our store in Naperville. But then we premiere a video the following Monday that goes over everything that we talked about in club. With that said, we have a presentation deck that goes along with Serger Club. Now, you're watching this video on YouTube for free. However, if you want our presentation deck, you're going to hop on over to BERNINA of NAperville.com, where you can get this presentation deck. Now, as I go through it, you're going to see that I talk about, the agenda and all of that stuff. There's a link to the video that you're watching now, just in case you forgot where you saw it. And I kind of go through, for instance, this month, what machines can do this technique. And you can use the L890 or the L890 Quilters Edition. I'm going to be using the regular L890, but there's also the Bernette 48, the Bernette 42, the Bernette 68, and the Bernette 62 that will also do this application. Another thing is I include a supply list of all the things that we use to make this possible. And you can see there the feet and all of these little guys that are underlined. Those are hyperlinks that will take you right to that product. And speaking of that product, one of the benefits about signing up for our Serger Club and paying your $15 is that we give you a 25% off code that you can use on specific items. And this month, it's the accessory holder and the belt loop attachment and the big book of serging and the extra cover stitch platform. So now we're going to talk about the stitches. So let's go over to the design table and kind of get you in the mood for what we're going to do today. I made a little sample and we're going to start off with a 3-thread wide cover stitch. Now you'll notice that the pretty side of this blue fabric is up in contrast, right? That's because we work with these upside down. So we're stitching from this side, and then our beautiful 12 weight thread presents on this side. So this is the 3-thread wide cover stitch. Then there's a 3-thread narrow stitch, which is this one. And you can perform the narrow stitches a couple of different ways, and there are different stitch numbers. There's the ones where you use the left cover and the center cover, and then there's one where you use the cover center and the right center needle. This one happened to be using the left cover and the center cover needles. Then there is the 2-thread chain. And basically, there are 3 types of ways that you can stitch this one. And this one is stitch number 32. You may not have 32 if you don't have the latest L890 update. However, this one is using the center needle and the cover stitch looper. And I have Wonderfill 100% cotton 12 weight thread. The spaghetti is what they call it, in all 3 of my cover stitch loopers for this. So then I took my 3-thread wide cover stitch and performed a 3-thread narrow cover stitch on top. Just like this is the 3-thread narrow cover with the 2-thread chain. And then this is all 3 together. 3-thread wide, 3-thread narrow, 2-thread chain, all stacked together. So this is one of those things where you may have to hold your mouth right in some degrees, but I did a little practice on this piece. This is a 3-thread wide cover with the 2-thread chain on top, and it kind of took a little vacation over here because as I was stitching it, I'm trying to aim for the center, but it didn't quite work. So that's okay. We've got tools in order to do that. So that leads me to what feet we're going to be using this month. There's a couple of feet that's going to make your life a little bit easier when we do our little tests this month. First one is C12. This is the compensating cover stitch foot. This one is for cover stitch only. And what's cool about this one is it's got this little mechanism in it that allows it to kind of move up and down. But what I like about it, it's giving us a groove right here to just ride right over our cover stitching. So for instance, I was talking about getting everything aligned perfectly. I did not use this foot on here and I didn't get my pieces just right. But what happens is with that little hump lining this up, it will keep your stitches stacked nice and perfect. But there is a little caveat to that. So I do this for our maiden voyage. And then I do this one when I'm doing my 3-thread narrow so that I can see exactly where I'm going. And I made a little tick on this foot just here because that's where I want to align my pieces. So for instance, if this is what I'm going to sew on to stack my stitches, I found that when I used this foot, I was relying more on just these two pieces here to align. But what happens is when we're doing one of our narrow stitches, it's either left cover or center cover or right cover and center cover, and that offsets our stitch. So then I need to kind of stitch it kind of half on and half off like that. And that is hard to maintain. But it's a little bit easier with the clear foot. So what I did is I made a little mark with a Sharpie exactly where that thread is of my previous stitching. So then when I line this guy down and I line it up right with that mark, it keeps it as straight as possible. So that's when you're doing a stitch like this one, where we have the wide and the narrow stacked on top of each other. Now, when we are making this stitch or this stitch, it actually comes out quite nice if we simply just take our foot like this, thread it up for our 2-thread chain, and then that center needle nests it right perfectly in place so that it doesn't move on us and it keeps everything nice and straight. And that's, if I hope you can see the difference here. So this one was using the clear foot there, and this one got a little bit more centered by using the C12. So I want you to take a memory trip back to February of this year, February 2025, when we did our woven hot pad and we used the belt loop attachment. So I have embedded that video in this lesson plan so you can watch it. But essentially, we're going to be attaching our C30 size 10 millimeter belt loop maker, which is this right here. And remember in that video, if you haven't seen it, you go back and watch it. I tell you that it's a good idea to attach your accessory attachment onto an extra cover stitch plate. See, this is my original one, and this is the one I purchased, so I don't have to keep unscrewing and switching these guys back and forth because, we always have to do something extra with these projects, right? And one of those extra things is we're going to do our stack stitches on a belt loop. So yeah, that's a thing, right? So basically, we're going to align this piece so that it fits nicely in front of our foot that's on our machine, whether it's the clear foot or it's the compensating foot. So let's put this guy on right after we talk about our fabric prep. I just had to use this new linen from Art Gallery Fabrics. It's really awesome. It's 60 inches wide. It has a really nice hand and it's perfect for apparel, home deck, and quilting. It's kind of like Essex linen, if you know what that was with Kaufman, but this is a little bit better because it just feels better and it washes up a little bit better. So I took a half a yard of this and then I added some fusible woven to the back so it gave it some vavoom. And one of the things that I want to make sure that you do is save a couple of squares or whatever of this so you can do some practice pieces like I did to just try the stitches individually before you start stacking them and then get some practice before you use the belt loop attachment if you haven't used that before. But what we do once we have the majority, right, of our piece with the fusible web is I'm pre-fusing it on there and then I cut my pieces. Now, this month for this fabric, this Art Gallery linen with the fusible woven on the backside of it, we need to cut this into 3/4 of an inch strips. And, this is a little bit of a challenge because the belt loop attachments are in metric and it really needs to be 20 millimeters that we're cutting. And 20 millimeters is somewhere between 3/4 and 7/8. But what I found is the thicker the fabric, the thinner you need to cut your strips. And the thinner the fabric, the thicker you need to cut them. So there is a range. So I say that range is somewhere between 3/4 and 7/8 of an inch. So we're just going to align this up on the 3/4 inch piece, and that's one strip. And I'm going to cut 3 strips. Now, like I said, I want to take a little bit of my extra stuff here so we can have some pieces to practice on. And none of this would be possible without the thread, right? And there are so many threads to choose from to do this. And this is our sample. You saw me wearing a headband made with this technique in the intro. And this is using 3 different stitches, stacked stitch on a belt loop. And then I made just 3 of them and braided them together. And then, of course, this could be used for so many different things. You could add it to little strap clamps with a little chain and a hook to make a bracelet, like you see there, right? You could do a headband like I did. And I mean, honestly, you just want to cover like your little raw edges and just glue this around the top like so to make a headband, right? Or you could use it like you would use the Renaissance ribbons and, put trim on a bag, use it as a handle for a bag, whatever. If I did use this as a handle for a bag, I'd probably put it, top stitch it down onto some webbing just to give it some more stability. But this is what we're aiming for. And so for our needles on our serger, we're going to need Ceracore. I just use the Ceracore because it's a durable thread, it's thin, and we need it to be less obtrusive because we really don't want to see what's going on here. But I like to have a color that blends in with my threads because I want the back. I want to be able to see what I'm sewing on the back, but I also want to be sure that it kind of blends in with my threads. So if you can see, our piece would be fused with white on the back like this, and I want to kind of be able to see those stitches so that as I stack them, I'm being as accurate as possible. So let's talk about our decorative threads. So I have a Wonderfill Fruity in two different styles here. These are their variegated. Fruity means that it's the 12 weight cotton, but variegated. And then I have a spaghetti, which is the 12 weight cotton, and spaghetti is their solid version of that thread. And then I have taken the 8 weight. So this is stuff that cannot go through your sewing machine needle or your serger needle, but it's fantastic for couching and all kinds of decorative embellishments. And this will go through the loopers of the machine with the help of a thread cradle. And so I just grabbed like a teal metallic and a cream metallic. And the metallic versions of these threads, which are the 8 weight rayon, that's called dazzle. The solid version of the thread that is rayon 8 weight, but no metallic, that's called razzle. Then you may need something to put these threads on. And I like this thread fusion tool. And this is from Gayle Yellen. She has a line of products, just like she has the cover stitch lock tool here. She also makes these thread fusion pieces in small and large. And this isn't, you don't really need these if you're just going to use one of these threads. But on my headband here, or my braided look, I actually used two threads together. So for instance, taking this cream and orange variegated and pairing it with the solid orange was really fun. Or pairing this with the teal was also fun. So this is very helpful if you want to put more than one thread through your loopers. And don't worry, I'm going to show you how to do that, but we have to walk before we run. So we're going to focus right now on just doing little practice pieces with one thick thread through the looper at a time. Okay, so I have set up my machine for stitch number 22, which is the 3 thread wide cover stitch. And I use my guided access on my Bernina L890. It just helps me keep everything organized and nice. And I am using one of the spaghetti threads that I have on my thread fusion tool. So now I'm going to take one of my scrap pieces and I'll be working wrong side up, and I'm just going to stitch out this stitch, number 23. And I'm using the clear foot, but at this point it doesn't matter much which foot I'm using. And I do like to start on an actual piece of fabric, even if it's just 1/8 of an inch past my needles there. So now let's get started here. And I'm going to use my lock tool. I'm going to lift my needles out of my work with my heel tap feature, pull my threads, cut them, then pull my piece and cut on the side. And now let's have a look at what we made. Looks cute. So that one looks pretty good. And so that was our number 23 stitch. So let's go ahead and switch to our number 23 stitch, which is the narrow stitch. So what I want to do now is remove the thread and everything from the thread path on my right needle, and I'm going to move my right needle here to the center. And don't forget, there's a new tool that just came out for your L890, and it's this little protective guard that you see here on my machine. And that prevents your screws from wiggling out when you're sewing. And I really highly recommend that you pick one of those up. They're only like $8 or something like that, maybe a little bit more, but nonetheless, it's worth it. So if you're buying some other pieces today when you're watching this video, don't forget to try and see if you can get one of those. We do sell them at Bernina of Naperville. So now that thread is now the green path. So I'm going to thread my machine along our green path for our center needle. And I'm going to use that needle threader just like I did before. You kind of need to make that little cross in front of it, straddle it with that little slot that's there. And then it pokes the thread through, and you can either pull it with your fingers or you can use that little hook that's on the end of it to pull it through. And now, just for, the sake of practicing and whatever, I'm not going to change our looper threads. But now we do have our narrow version of the stitch. And then the funnest part is to switch from this stitch to our 2-thread chain because it's so easy. And there's the 3-thread narrow and the 3-thread wide. And then for a chain, which is stitch number 32, we are just simply going to remove our needle, which is the left needle here. I'm going to pull that guy out, unthread it, place it down there in our little needle holder. And then I want to make sure I pull the thread through the path all the way there so we don't have any thread at all down here other than the thread that's going through our center needle. Okay, so now let's have a look at this one. There we go. All right, so this was all done with the 12-weight cotton spaghetti. Now, let's have a look at using the razzle or the dazzle. Remember, dazzle has metallic, razzle doesn't. So this is just the one that I'm going to use to show you how to use this thicker thread. And we're going to place this in our cover stitch path. Floss it through like that. And now I will have to feed this through with a thread cradle. So this is about 48 inches of my Serger thread, and there's a loop that I have on my finger. I'm going to hold it like that, and I'm going to feed these 2 threads through using my air threading. So it's important to hold on to it or else it will just blow across the room there. So there's my loop. I'm going to feed my dazzle through that loop and then pull it through. There it is. And now we're ready to go. Now you may want to loosen up your tension just a little bit on our cover stitch here. The default is 1.5, but I'm going to go to 1.2. And now let's give it a go. Now this is a chain stitch that I'm doing, but this is threaded exactly the same way if you're going to use this for the 3-thread wide, the 3-thread narrow, or this chain stitch. And this is also worked upside down, so don't forget that. All right, well, now that we know how to use a thread cradle, why don't we try doing 2 threads at once? So I'm just going to switch back to my number 22 wide 3-thread cover stitch, which means that I'll be threading up those needles again. Okay, so now let's thread up 2 threads at one time. So I'm selecting this light blue and the orange together just because I wanted something with a lot of contrast so you could see the two together. I take these through as one. Then I'm going to use that same thread cradle, and we're going to remember the importance of keeping those threads at the bottom even so we can feed them through there nicely. And I'm going to also remember to hook the loop on one of my fingers so the thread doesn't fly across the room. So there it goes here. There's the thread, and there's my 2 threads as one. And now we're ready to try this stitch. I haven't made any adjustments to the stitch, so it's possible that we will have to adjust the tension just a little bit. Let's have a look. Nope. Look how full that looks. In fact, let's compare that to this piece from my practice. I love it. In fact, I think it could be fun to even do just 2 strands of the same color to achieve that thick looking, braided looking stitch. All right. Do you think we're ready to attach the belt loop attachment? Come on, let's do it. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is switch out our C27 clear foot for our C12 compensating foot. Perfect. And now I'm keeping my machine threaded up with that number 22 wide cover stitch. And now I can switch my cover stitch table with this, the one that has the accessory attachment already on it here. And then don't forget, I like to keep my attachments with their screws. So I've just unscrewed this, but we're going to put this on. It slips under there just like so. And then just a little bit of information about this. We have so many options to adjust this. When you attach this, I don't worry so much about exactly where they are because I usually have motion back and forth here by adjusting this just a little bit and see how I can get it right in front of the groove on that foot. And then I also have the ability to undo this screw, which moves it back and forth. If I have a longer foot, I can move it out. If I have a shorter foot, I can move it closer. Okay, I think I've adjusted it fine. So now it's time to close my door, take a strip, and we put these strips in wrong side down like this. And I like to cut these into kind of a little point like this. Makes it easier to feed it through the machine. And then I like to point at things with my stiletto, but it's also good to feed this through as well. So we're going to feed this through, lift our foot, and lift up our toe and just gently grab that. Now you're going to sacrifice a couple inches on the end here. And my stiletto got into a little accident, so it's a little curved at the end, so it kind of gets stuck sometimes. There we go. Okay, so now we do want to make sure that this is catching the needles right under the foot, like so. There we go. And now one of the reasons why I'm using this foot is that it's just going to cradle the width of this particular item so well. So now we're going to gently start stitching. Now I'm going to stop. I've got about an inch of it still left, but I wanted to just inspect and see what's happening. I mean, it's great. All right, let's grab another strip. And we're going to do the same thing. Make sure it's got a point. And now I'm just kind of piggybacking these on top of each other as they go through the machine. You can see here, just kind of. But what I don't like to do with this is stitch my strips together. It's too bulky. Doesn't go through the little flute of the belt loop attachment because these belt loop attachments aren't really meant to make like yardage and yardage and yardage. It's meant for a belt loop. But now our piece is kind of sewn together up there, but I will cut them apart just a little bit. Okay, I have one more piece. Now we can lift our needles out, pull our threads, remove our loops, and cut. And now we're going to switch back to our regular table because we don't need our belt loop attachment anymore. And we can take off our cover stitching foot for the 3-thread narrow stitch. And I'm going to switch up what goes in my lower looper. Okay, so now I have my clear foot on, no belt loop attachment, and I am taking my little Sharpie bit that I did there and following that stitching line. So let's zoom in. So my Sharpie edge here, I've got one here, but I've got another one here that's right on top there. And now that's what I'm going to keep lined up as I stitch. And I opted to put my darker variegated and the bright teal together for this pass. Let's have a look. Pretty cool. And I have not cut my straps apart yet because it's easier to do them all together like one. Now, I don't want you to get too worked up if you wiggle off of the piece, because when we're braiding this, or if you choose to braid this, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Also, you can see I kind of had one of my threads got stuck on there, but I'm just going to trim that off, no worries. There we go. And you can kind of see that holding my fingers here in front of the foot is stabilizing it so I can try to keep it straight as best as I can. Now, if you were making a super long braid and you had like this going on where you wanted to join the pieces, you might be able to, as you braid it, cover that up a little bit. But I'm not going to be making my braid very long. I just have 3 pieces from the bias pieces that you saw me cut. Here's another junction that can be a little bit wiggly going over. All right, now I'm going to put in some of that dazzle so that we can do our final go. And that means that I'm going to also replace this to the compensating foot. Okay, so we're all set up for our final pass here. And I've got the compensating foot back on. And my 2-thread chain, which is in the center position, number 32, and that's going to keep that chain stitch centered where it needs to be, right in the middle of this. Look how nice that looks. Perfectly centered. It really looks like trim. So think of all the uses that you could do something that would be trim like this. I mean, it could be in lieu of ribbon. It could be used for all kinds of fun things. I mean, it could even be for fancy belt loops. You would be the fanciest belt loop wearer in town. All right, now let's have a little lesson in braiding. All we're going to do is cut this into 3 pieces. So I just cut it right at those intersections where I attach them together. And like I told you earlier, you're going to sacrifice a couple of inches of these. So here are my 3 pieces. Now let's line them up and tape them. I'm just going to take some tape and tape them to my table like this. And then if you've never braided before, I think it's kind of easy. Kind of learned how to French braid my own hair back in the day when that was popular. Okay, so we're going to go over, take that right piece and bring it over the center piece. Now we're going to take the left piece and bring it over that widest piece. And now we have another outer piece that goes over the center, and then this piece that goes over the center. And it's up to you how tight you want to try to do this. And that's why we cut this on the bias as well, because cutting this on the bias will allow us to really bend this work around. And of course, the secret ingredient at the end of this is giving it a nice steam with the Laura Star. And you could braid it for as long as you need, or you could braid it for a project that might come up later if you don't know exactly what you're going to do with this. I have trims that stay in my drawer for a long time before I figure out what I want to do with them. And then if you didn't even want to braid, check this out. On this little headband, it's perfect width. So that could be an option just on its own. So I'm going to stop mine here. And I'm just going to do this temporarily until I get it to the iron to press it. All right. Go give it a little pressing. It's simple to press. We just want to have a lot of steam and we want to have this fairly straight like that. Now, we're just going to steam this down and then it's essentially forming it in to that curvy braid shape. So from some simple practice pieces to some trim to a little headband and a wristlet. I made it a little big, but ta-da!
So what do you think? Are you going to give something like this a try? I think it's important to learn how to do something like this for home dec, for trims, for belts, for bracelets, for headbands. You know, the sky is the limit. And you know, one thing's for sure, you can find other videos and other fun things like this on our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel. There's about 600 videos now, and it's pretty easy to find because it's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville. And do us a solid, like, comment, and subscribe if you see something that you like. All right, until then, happy serging.